Welcome back. One particular controversy surrounding the US-India nuclear deal is that India, a country with a large weapons program, has not signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Well, the treaty, administered by the UN and overseen by the IAEA, was set up to stop nuclear weapons technology spreading over the world. But as well as halting the spread of the atom bomb, the NPT is meant to promote cooperation in the peaceful use of nuclear energy. It also says peaceful nuclear technology should be made equally available to all signatory states. Well, there are safeguards, of course. Countries that have signed up to the treaty must cooperate fully with the IAEA inspections of nuclear sites. Well, just how the US treats each would-be nuclear player varies according to their politics, of course. At the end of 2003, Libya renounced its nuclear weapons program after secret talks with the US and Britain. Libya ratified the NPT the following year. Then there's North Korea. In 1994, Washington and Pyongyang signed a deal outside of the NPT agreement. When that deal collapsed in 2002, well, the US sought to coax Pyongyang with promises of aid and normalized relations. Now, the US's take on Iran is very different, though. Washington accuses Tehran, a signatory of the NPT, of secretly harboring a nuclear weapons program. Iran denies this, saying it's fully cooperated with the International Atomic Agency. Well, the US has raised the spectre of war. Israel's cozy relationship, on the other hand, with the US has been unaffected by its nuclear arsenal. And now there's India, of course, which is enjoying Washington's good grace. Well, back in August, Richard Burns from the US State Department compared the Indian nuclear case with the Iranian.
We have this anomalous situation now where we have countries like India on the outside that have been playing by the rules, and we have countries like Iran on the inside as members of the NPT that have actually cheated on their NPT obligations. So we want to focus and to bring India in, and then we also want to make sure that we can all work together to deny Iran the nuclear weapons capability that we believe it is planning to acquire.
Well, joining us once again are our guests in Delhi, Uday Bhaskar, the former Deputy Director of the Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis; from Islamabad, Shireen Mazari, Director of the Institute of Strategic Studies; and in Washington, D.C., Jeffrey Lewis, Director of the Nuclear Strategy and Non-Proliferation Initiative at the New American Foundation. Thank you all for joining us. If I could start with Mr. Lewis once again. Basically, how can the US say yes to India and no to countries like Pakistan and Iran? Does it make sense to you?
No, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the very frustrating thing about the agreement from my perspective is it's false to say that India has played by the rules. I mean, India's plutonium production reactor that they used to make the plutonium for their weapons program was provided by Canada under the agreement that it be used for peaceful purposes. And India tried to say that their 1974 nuclear test was a peaceful nuclear explosion. So that's an instance of not playing by the rules. And there are other instances of India using illicit procurement networks to procure prohibited items for its centrifuge programs. And so in many ways, I mean, while I feel that Iran has in fact violated its safeguards agreement, precisely the problem with this deal is that India has also violated its agreements and its obligations in the past. And so as a consequence, it becomes very hard to look at the India deal and conclude this is anything else other than the United States saying some countries are good guys and some countries are bad guys. But of course, that's not going to be persuasive in much of the world.
All right, let's go over to India. Mr. Bhaskar, you were talking earlier there of the changing situation. It does look like the US is heading towards welcoming India into the club of recognized nuclear powers. Does that mean perhaps the rules of the game should be revisited? New treaties should be visited, perhaps?
Sami, yes, in a way, I think that after the end of the Cold War and more recently, after the Bush administration came into the White House in 2001, there was a fundamental review within the United States government about its own nuclear policies. And the Bush administration, amongst other things, rejected the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. It abrogated the ABM, the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, and I think came up with this determination that the 21st century poses new challenges and that the existing NPT needed to be buttressed, that you needed to create a new scaffolding, if you will, around it.
What sort of new scaffolding?
And I think
What's
the July
alternative?
2005, Yeah, the alternative is the July 2005 agreement, to my mind, is one such initiative, which is to bring a major quote-unquote responsible power like India into the loop. And this is where I'd like to differ with Mr. Lewis. I think his assertion about India and the suggestion that it had engaged in what he used the word illicit networks is counterfactual. I'm sure Mr. Lewis is well versed with details of the Indian program, but I think it would be very, very misleading to make this assertion on Al Jazeera that India has engaged in this kind of an activity, because part of the track record that India has brought to the table, and this has been acknowledged in the debates in the US Congress, where you had some very, very staunch non-proliferation advocates in the United States. Nobody has made this kind of an allegation against India, so I think that should be placed on the record. And the new initiatives that the US government is now bringing to the table are part of what the 21st century's challenges and the way in which they believe the global community can deal with them. Now, this is not just the US alone. This particular agreement has also been supported, Sammy, let me finish, by Russia, by France, by UK, and some of the other major members of the nuclear suppliers group. So there is a consensus that is building.
Let's shift gears a little bit. Let's go over to Shireen Mazari in Islamabad. And listening there, I mean, the basic idea seems to be that there's becoming so many exceptions to the rule. The rule doesn't really hold anymore, does it? Is it time to explore maybe other agreements that would limit the use of nuclear material and technology for military purposes rather than the old NPT school of thought, so to speak?
Well, my point is simply this, that if you're going to change the rules, you can't change them for one country. Then you must change them on a matter of principle, because they're proven to be inadequate. And therefore, some of us have been suggesting for a while now that the way to alter the NPT, and the NPT itself has a provision because of the 5-yearly review conferences, the way to alter and adjust it to the ground realities of the present is to have an additional protocol to be signed by India and Pakistan, bringing them as nuclear weapon states within the non-proliferation regime, giving them the responsibilities and obligations of nuclear weapon states, because that is a ground reality. And I must disagree with my friend Uday Bhaskar in New Delhi.
Very briefly,
India's
Shireen.
record is sketchy. We know of India's nuclear deal with Saddam, the training of Iraqi scientists. We know of Indian scientists working in Iran. So let's not sort of say that there are no question marks on India's record.
Well, question marks we'll have to explore another time. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. We'll have to thank our guests, Uday Bhaskar from the Institute for Defence Studies and Analysis, Shireen Mazari from the Institute of Strategic Studies, and Jeffrey Lewis from the New America Foundation. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments and suggestions. As always, you can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's insidestory@aljazeera.net. For now, and on behalf of the Inside Story team, it's goodbye.